They tried to sell my $2,300,000 family ranch while I was 800 miles away burying my father. For 3 generations this land had been Morrison soil, built by hand, preserved by blood and sweat. As if fate hadn't already hit me hard enough with my father's sudden heart attack in Montana, I came home at dawn to find strangers walking my land with clipboards, an oversized auction sign staked in my yard, and HOA President Karen Whitfield calling 911 to report me for trespassing on property that had been in my family since 1967. I never signed their HOA, never agreed to their rules, never gave them authority over 1 inch of Morrison soil. But they thought a grieving man would be too broken to fight back. They thought while I was gone they could take everything. They couldn't have been more wrong. My name is Jake Morrison. I am a 3rd-generation cattle rancher in Colorado. 4 to 7 acres of pasture, cedar fences, barns, and a gravel road my grandfather built himself. After cancer took my wife Sarah, it has been just me and my 16-year-old daughter Emma keeping the land alive with 30 head of cattle. Life was already hard enough, but 3 years ago development came and with it the Maplewood Heights subdivision. Within months they formed an HOA with Karen as president, a woman who measured neighbors' grass with a ruler and issued violation notices for Christmas lights left up past January 2nd. She decided from the first day that I was her enemy. She claimed my fence was 18 inches onto their common land. She claimed my cattle smelled in summer. She claimed my gravel entrance damaged their subdivision's median. Every month brought some new claim, some new fine, some new threat. I ignored them all because this ranch was never part of their HOA. Then came last Tuesday. My father collapsed in Montana. By Wednesday he was gone. I left immediately to bury him, leaving Emma with her best friend's family. My neighbor Bill Hendricks, a retired county surveyor, promised to check the cattle twice a day. I thought the ranch would wait while I honored my father. I was wrong. Thursday night Emma's text hit me like an electric shock. Dad, please come back, something's happening at the ranch. I cut the funeral short and drove through the night. By the time I reached the front range dawn was breaking. I expected to see cattle in their fields. Instead I saw 2 men in suits on my land, measuring my fences with surveying equipment. And in my yard stood a sign. For auction. Maplewood Heights Community Authority. I slammed my truck door and marched across the gravel, boots crunching on the same stones my grandfather had laid down 50 years ago. "Excuse me, gentlemen," I said. "What do you think you are doing here?" The tall assessor barely looked up. "Sir," he said, "we are conducting a pre-auction assessment. This property is scheduled for public sale this Saturday." My chest burned. "This is my land," I said, "and you are trespassing." The shorter one smirked. "Sir, we have authorization. Please don't interfere." I pulled out my phone to call the sheriff, but the taller man was already on his phone. "We have a situation, the subject is confrontational." Minutes later, a white Mercedes SUV stormed up my driveway, leaving dust across my grandfather's fence posts. Out stepped Karen herself, dressed like she was headed to a board meeting instead of a theft. "Mr. Morrison," she said with a smile that could cut glass, "you are in violation of a court order. These gentlemen have every right to be here." "What court order?" I demanded. "This is my ranch and you have no authority." Karen's smile flipped to venom. She pulled out her phone and dialed. "Yes, 911, we have a trespasser threatening our authorized team." 20 minutes later, a sheriff's vehicle appeared. Deputy Maria Santos stepped out. I knew her. Her daughter was on Emma's team. We had talked at school functions. Karen rushed to her like a stage actor. "Officer, this man is obstructing our assessment," she insisted. "He owes $47,000 in fines. This property is scheduled for foreclosure and auction." Maria frowned. "Can I see your papers?" Karen produced a thick binder with bold writing on top. "Notice of Property Forfeiture, Maplewood Heights Community Authority." According to it, I supposedly owed tens of thousands for violations including fence encroachment and road disturbance. I stared in disbelief. "Maria," I said, "this is my deed. I have the tax records. My family has owned and paid taxes on this land since 1967. Karen crossed her arms. "Ignorance of HOA covenants is no defense, Mr. Morrison. Mail was sent multiple times. Refusal to sign constitutes acknowledgement." I barked back, "I never refused any mail." Maria studied my documents, her brow heavy. She finally said to Karen, "According to county records, this ranch has been Morrison land for decades. Unless you have a court order, I cannot treat this auction as legal authority. Karen's voice went sharp. Deputy, the auction is Saturday. Delays will cost thousands. Then I noticed the sign. It had been hammered 2 feet inside my fence line, planted firmly on my soil. That sign is on my property, I said. Remove it. Karen hissed back. You touch that sign and I'll have you arrested for vandalism. I tried calling my lawyer, Tom Bradley. Out of office until Wednesday. I tried 2 others. None available on weekend. The timing was too perfect. Karen saw the frustration in my eyes and smirked. Timing is everything, Mr. Morrison. This auction will proceed, whether you accept it or not. I stood there in my own yard, clutching my deed, watching them walk across my father's ground like they already owned it. And I swore then and there that Saturday would not be their victory. It would be their reckoning. After Deputy Santos left, the so-called assessors kept working as if nothing had happened. Their tripods and measuring sticks were still spread across my fence line, ignoring 60 years of history. I went straight to my barn and pulled out a rolled-up survey my grandfather had filed in 1967. The paper was yellowed and creased, but the lines were still solid and binding. According to it, the fence sat 3 full feet inside our boundary. I walked back and shoved it in front of the taller assessor. This is legally binding. This fence was built long before your subdivision existed. He barely looked up before dismissing me with one word. Outdated. He straightened his back and waved a shinier document in front of me. We have a certified 2022 survey, he said flatly. This clearly shows encroachment. My anger roared inside. Who authorized this survey? I never signed for any new survey. That's when Karen stepped forward from behind them, phone camera in hand, recording me like she already had evidence of a crime. The Maplewood Heights HOA commissioned it, she said with a smirk. It proves you are in violation. Before I could reply, headlights pulled up the gravel drive. An old Ford pickup rattled to a stop. Out stepped my neighbor Bill Hendricks, the 73-year-old retired county surveyor who had worked this land long before the HOA was built. His hands rested on his hips and his eyes scanned over the suits standing where they did not belong. Lady, he said with dry laughter, this fence hasn't moved an inch since Jake's grandfather built it. I would know, I inspected it myself. Karen cut back sharply. This is HOA business. Bill only chuckled harder. HOA business on Morrison land? You've lost your jurisdiction before you even started. By now neighbors were gathering, some filming on their phones, others whispering in confusion. Mrs. Patterson, whose dog I had saved twice from drowning in the cattle pond, refused to look at Karen. A few looked loyal to her still, but most faces showed doubt. Karen ordered them loudly to record everything, shouting that my obstruction must be documented. Deputy Santos finally cut through and spoke calmly. Under Colorado law, adverse possession requires 18 years of continuous occupation. This fence has been here 58 years without dispute. The original deed takes priority over your covenants. The words landed like a hammer blow, and for the first time since this nightmare began, I felt something shift in my favor. Karen was not moved. She snapped her binder shut and hissed, "The board will decide this afternoon. Meeting at 2 o'clock, sharp. You won't have a say." By that afternoon I had made up my mind. Invite or not, I was walking into their board meeting. Karen greeted me at her doorway like a bouncer. "This is a private meeting," she barked. "You are not HOA." I stepped forward, boots scraping the concrete, and looked her right in the eye. "I am the property owner you are trying to steal from. That gives me more right to be in here than anyone." Inside, 5 members sat in rows, Karen as president, Richard Stanton the vice president, Jennifer Walsh the secretary who also worked for Karen's real estate office, Marcus Chen the treasurer looking deeply uncomfortable, and Patricia Vance, the only one whose eyes betrayed conscience. I dropped my folder onto the coffee table. Original 1967 deed, survey map, tax records, handwritten notes from my grandfather. "These are real," I said, "and they prove this fence was here before any of you even lived here." Karen slid her glossy survey onto the table, signed by one Robert Kumar. I scanned the signature and frowned. Never heard of this man. I never authorized him. I want to speak to him directly. "Not necessary," Karen replied quickly. "The survey is certified. That is all you need." Richard Stanton read from the covenant like scripture, declaring that any encroachment meant property rights were abandoned. Jennifer waved so-called meeting minutes from 2021 claiming I had been notified, but I knew I had not. Then I saw it. The notices were sent to the wrong address, one letter off in the email spelling. That was their foundation. You built your whole case on sending fake notifications to an address that doesn't exist, I snapped. That's not notice, that's fraud. Bill, who had followed me in, leaned forward. I check Jake's property daily. No surveyors, no strangers, and this fence is exactly where it has stood for decades. Stanton sneered. Are you even licensed? Bill's eyes burned into his. I am a retired county surveyor, still licensed, and my word is worth more than this fake paper. Marcus shifted uneasily. Maybe we should postpone until legal counsel reviews everything. Karen cut him off immediately. No. We are moving forward. Auction is set, security is hired, marketing fees are already paid. There is no delay. Then came their vote. Karen, Stanton, and Jennifer voted yes to proceed. Marcus abstained. Patricia voted no. The tally stood 3-1. Karen leaned back with victorious satisfaction and declared, the auction will continue on Saturday. Nothing will stop it. I clenched my hands around my grandfather's deed, the only shield I held against their fraud. To them, I was already finished. But as I walked back into the mountain air, I made a vow to myself. They had built their case on forged documents, wrong addresses, and manipulation. They thought it would be enough. They had no idea an old rancher and his family could strike back harder than they ever imagined. After the stack board meeting, I knew their plan was bigger and dirtier than I had imagined. They were not just harassing me with fake notices. They had designed a full-scale fraud to steal my ranch using forged documents and intimidation. They thought an old fence and a bullied rancher would fold under pressure, but they underestimated how far I was willing to go. Back at my kitchen table, I began making calls. 2 lawyers refused to take my case for the weekend, but on the 3rd attempt I found someone who answered. Her name was Sarah Chen, a property rights attorney known for dealing with land fraud. She listened carefully, then told me plainly, Mr. Morrison, what you are describing is not a violation issue, it is criminal fraud. Bring me everything you have by morning. The next day I walked into her office carrying boxes of records, the original deed, the survey my grandfather filed in 1967, and every notice Karen had pushed under my door. Sarah spread each paper across the conference table like a detective assembling evidence. As her eyes moved line by line, her expression shifted from confusion to anger, and finally to certainty. Jake, she said, the Maplewood Heights HOA has absolutely no jurisdiction over your ranch. I checked the original developer plat from 2019 and your land was specifically excluded from HOA boundaries. Legally, they have no authority here. Sarah then pulled up what Karen had filed in 2021 as an amended covenant extension. It claimed to extend HOA authority over adjacent properties. But there was a major problem. It had never been approved by the County Planning Commission and it had never been signed by any affected property owners. It was a hollow fraudulent document designed only to look official. The nail in the coffin came when Sarah called the surveyor whose name appeared on the 2022 boundary report. Robert Kumar answered on speakerphone. Sarah asked if he had ever surveyed Morrison Ranch. His voice was sharp with anger. I have never surveyed that ranch, he said. That is not my signature. Someone forged this. Listening to him, my blood boiled. Here was the proof we needed. The HOA had not only fabricated documents but stolen a man's professional identity to justify their theft. Kumar promised to file a complaint and stand with us in court. Sarah dug deeper and revealed Karen's financial motive. Her real estate company had secured an exclusive listing contract that would guarantee her a commission of more than $140,000 if my property was forced into sale. It finally made sense why Stanton and Walsh supported her every move. Stanton had invested big money into her company and Jennifer Walsh worked for her directly. The conspiracy was laid bare. That evening my neighbor Tommy Martinez showed up. He was just 23 but ran a popular YouTube channel about rural life. He had watched Karen's flyers appear all over the neighborhood and could not believe what was happening. Jake, he said holding his camera, people need to see what is going on here. The world won't believe it unless they see it themselves. At first I did not want strangers watching me drown in this fight, but when I looked at the giant wooden auction sign staked into my soil I agreed. That night Tommy went live with the title Insane HOA Trying to Steal Neighbor's Ranch. Within the first hour, nearly 1,000 viewers tuned in. Comments flooded the screen in real time. Stand strong, Jake. This is theft. Expose her. By the next evening, the local news stations had called me asking for interviews. The story was out, and it was growing. Sarah returned to my ranch the next day and turned my dining table into a battlefield map. She laid documents, highlighted statutes, forged records, and county files in neat rows. Jake, she said with calm focus, this case is one of the clearest instances of property fraud I have ever seen. We have your grandfather's deed, the legal plat excluding you from the HOA, the forged survey with a stolen signature, and the financial motive connecting Karen and Stanton. This is strong enough to go beyond the county courts. We are taking this to the district attorney, the real estate commission, and even the FBI if needed. Meanwhile, Emma contributed from her side. She researched auction regulations on her laptop and discovered that Colorado requires a 30-day permit in advance before any property auction, filed with proof of ownership. She brought the information to me and said, "Dad, they never even applied. Without that permit, everything they are doing is illegal from the ground up." I confirmed her discovery with the county clerk, who explained it clearly. They cannot legally auction anything without state-issued permits. The tide was turning. What began as their fraudulent display of power was becoming a mountain of evidence stacked against them. I sat on my porch that evening watching the sunset light the pasture's gold. For the first time since burying my father, I felt a sense of control. They thought Saturday would be the day they sold my ranch to the highest bidder. Instead, Saturday was going to be the day they met the reckoning they had created for themselves. Saturday morning felt like the beginning of a war. The HOA thought they had orchestrated everything perfectly, but I had assembled my own allies. By 6 a.m. neighbors, supporters, and curious onlookers began gathering at my ranch gates. By 7, local news vans set up cameras, reporters adjusted their mics, and Tommy Martinez was already live streaming with thousands of people watching across the country. The sun had barely risen and the tension was so thick you could feel it vibrating in the cold morning air. Karen Whitfield arrived in her white Mercedes SUV, stepping out with her clipboard like a queen ready to preside over a coronation. With her came Richard Stanton, her vice president, and 2 men in tactical gear pretending to be security. Their uniforms looked aggressive but unlicensed. Pure intimidation theater. Karen's voice carried over the crowd as she declared that the Maplewood Heights Community Authority was about to conduct the official auction of Morrison Ranch. Her tone was smug, her face defiant, but underneath her mask I could already see cracks. By 8:30, Sarah Chen walked up to Karen with the emergency injunction in her hand. Her voice was calm but loud enough for everyone and all the cameras to hear. "Miss Whitfield, you are now under a binding court order. This auction is illegal." Karen's reply was to rip the injunction paper in half and sneer into the cameras. "This auction will proceed." The gasps from the crowd and the flashes from the media said it all. Tearing up a court order live on film destroyed whatever shred of credibility she had left. 9 o'clock sharp, Sheriff Martinez and his deputies arrived. The sheriff examined Sarah's paperwork and turned to Karen. "This is a valid court order. The auction cannot continue." Karen's voice was shrill. "Sheriff, you have no authority here. This is private HOA property business. Morrison is trespassing." That's when Robert Kumar, the real surveyor whose name Karen had forged, stepped forward and raised his voice so everyone in the valley could hear. "I never signed your survey. I never worked for your HOA. That is not my signature. This is fraud." The crowd erupted in shock. Dozens of phones went up, cameras zoomed, reporters scrambled to capture every angle. Karen froze, visibly rattled, her facade crumbling in real time. Moments later, 2 black SUVs turned into my drive and FBI agent Rodriguez and his partner walked out calmly. Their presence sent an electric jolt through the gathered mass of neighbors and press. Agent Rodriguez announced clearly, "Miss Whitfield, we need to speak with you regarding federal charges of conspiracy and fraud." Karen shouted back, "I am conducting a legal auction. You have no say here." The agent's voice was steady and unshaken. "This is a federal arrest warrant. Step forward." Karen, in one last manic attempt, climbed atop a makeshift podium and screamed, "Auction will proceed." The sheriff ordered her down. She ignored him. So Agent Rodriguez stepped up, cuffs in his hands, and declared, "Karen Whitfield, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, identity theft, and attempted real estate theft." Her face turned ashen. The deputies moved in and the cuffs clicked tight. She wailed about harassment and rights, but the crowd erupted into cheers so loud they drowned her out. Her own allies faltered. Stanton slipped backward, clearly realizing his money had been thrown into a criminal scheme. Jennifer Walsh, who had been keeping records, stepped forward with her laptop and handed the FBI all the incriminating emails. "Once we get Morrison's land, we are set for life," one of Karen's lines read publicly. That was the smoking gun, captured by every news camera. Tommy's livestream numbers skyrocketed as the world witnessed it live. Reporters filed real-time. Breaking: HOA president arrested at a legal ranch auction. Neighbors who had once followed Karen's threats were now shouting, "Lock her up." Her so-called hired guards melted away, stripping off their gear to avoid becoming accomplices. I stood quietly on my own porch, the same place where days earlier I had watched strangers measure my fence. This time I held my original deed in my hand while the crowd cheered. The fraudulent queen was in handcuffs, dragged away in front of the very people she had tried to manipulate. For the first time in weeks I felt real peace. The auction she promised never happened. The reckoning I swore was real. As Karen was pushed into the back of the FBI vehicle in handcuffs, her face pale from humiliation, a wave of cheers rolled across the entire valley. Neighbors who had once obeyed her out of fear now shouted with relief, some chanting her name with scorn, others clapping loudly as the cameras rolled. It was finished. Stanton tried to distance himself immediately, hands raised, stammering at reporters that he had been misled, while Jennifer Walsh handed over her laptop to the FBI with every incriminating email she had saved. They had all been tricked and manipulated by the same woman who had believed herself untouchable. I walked to the auction sign planted in my soil and asked the sheriff if I could finally take it down. He smiled and nodded. With one hard pull I ripped it out of the ground and snapped it over my knee. The sound cracked like thunder in the quiet morning and the crowd erupted again. They were not celebrating only for me but for the truth. For once, honesty had defeated manipulation. The coverage spread instantly. By the evening, every major news channel was running the story of the Colorado rancher who had stopped his HOA from stealing 3 generations of family land. FBI agent Rodriguez announced that Karen Whitfield would face federal fraud charges along with conspiracy, forgery, and attempted property theft. Within weeks, Karen pled guilty. She was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison and ordered to pay $500,000 in restitution to her victims. Stanton was fined and placed on probation. His standing in the community finished. Jennifer Walsh, who had provided evidence, was granted immunity. Kumar successfully sued for damages to his professional reputation and won a large settlement. The Maplewood Heights HOA underwent an emergency election. Patricia Vance was chosen as the new president, and her first act was to issue me and my family a formal apology in writing, something I never thought I would see. The new board rewrote their covenants, stripped away abusive clauses, and rebuilt the HOA into something transparent, nothing like the weapon Karen had turned it into. Neighbors who once avoided me now came to my porch to shake my hand and bring food for Emma. Mrs. Patterson arrived weekly with a homemade pie to apologize for not standing with me sooner. The division she had caused was healing in a way I never expected. 6 months later, I hosted a gathering on the ranch. We had live music, barbecue, and speeches about property rights and family. 500 people came from around Colorado. We called it the Property Rights Victory Festival. It raised $47,000 to help other homeowners facing HOA abuse, the exact figure Karen had falsely claimed I owed. It felt like poetic justice. Tommy's YouTube series about the entire event exploded. Millions watched the episodes titled HOA Ranch Takeover Exposed and Colorado Rancher Stands His Ground. His channel became a hub for rural homeowners across the country, and even law schools began to reference my case as an example in fraud prosecution. Sarah Chen spoke at conferences nationwide, using our victory to teach other attorneys how to recognize and defeat schemes like Karen's. Legislators passed updated laws adding harsher penalties for HOA leaders who attempt property fraud. The story of Morrison Ranch was no longer just mine. It had become a symbol. But what mattered most was personal. My daughter Emma completed her senior project on property rights, and I watched with pride as she explained to her class that no covenant supersedes the truth of family, legacy, and law. She told them my grandfather built this fence, my father preserved it, and my dad defended it. One day I will inherit it, and then my children will too. The ranch was still here, still ours, still alive. Every evening I walked that fence line as the sun faded into purple shadows behind the front range. I laid my hand across the same cedar posts my grandfather had hammered into the ground decades ago. Those posts had survived storms, drought, fire, and now fraud. They were more than wood driven into dirt. They were proof that legacy cannot be bought or stolen. Some victories are not about money or power. Some victories are about protecting what matters most. As I stood on that porch, flag waving above me, cattle grazing quietly in the fields, and Emma laughing with her friends in the yard, I understood something deeply. This was never just me versus an HOA. This was right versus wrong. This was family versus greed. This was America reminding itself that you cannot steal a man's land with forged papers, intimidation, or lies. The Morrison Ranch had already stood for 60 years. Now I knew it would stand for 60 more.